Hello, I am Walking the Cow, and today I'm going to talk you through some of my favourite cult horror films from the 1970s. Like I did with the 1980s, I'm going to go from 1970 up to 1979, and I'm going to choose a film from each year. Let me know in the comments below if there's any that you're interested in or ones that you'd like to see, and I'm going to get straight on with it. 1970, and we're going to go straight away with The Wizard of Gore. This was a film by Herschel Gordon Lewis. He's pretty well known for making these really grotesque horror films, but he was doing it a long time before a lot of people were daring to do some of the things that he did. And so The Wizard of Gore is about this couple, and the girlfriend or the wife is obsessed with this guy. He's called Montag the Magnificent, and is this guy who does these magic shows. But what happens is he hypnotizes people in the audience, gets them up on the stage, he'll saw them in half, or he'll do some, just really violent magic tricks, and then the people will turn up dead. And so, instead of being one of these magicians that uses all the fancy special effects and practical jokes or what have you, he actually does kill them, and the bodies start turning up. But it's really, really... It really pushes it, this film, especially for 1970. And like I said, Herschel Gordon Lewis, people used to call him the godfather of gore. They used to say the same thing about Lucio Fulci too. But Gordon Lewis were doing it way before. He sadly passed away a few years ago. Although it's not my favourite film of his, I think that would be 2000 Maniacs. I definitely recommend this one still. It's up there as one of his best, and I'm sure plenty of people know it already. The main thing to take away from this is just the violence. I mean, for a film in 1970, and it's the same in his other films, every other film that I've seen by H.G. Lewis, you get the violence and you get the blood, but the camera doesn't pull away when you kind of expect it to, and so you kind of get the violence, and the gore is kind of extended and goes on. It always goes on a little bit longer than you expect it to. But it's a really, really good film. I would recommend this to anybody that wants to see something that's just really, really nasty. But you can't go wrong with anything by Herschel Gordon Lewis. He's really, really good. 1971, and I'm going to have to go with A Lizard in a Woman's Skin. You know that I can't really do I can't really do videos on horror films without mentioning Lucio Fulci about a billion times. Well, he had a little go at writing this one as well as a bunch of other people, but he did direct this, and a lot of people really like this, and I can see why. It's probably my top 5 films of his. But yes, a really bizarre title, A Lizard in a Woman's Skin. I can tell you where that comes from in a minute. But it stars Florinda Balkana. She's absolutely beautiful. I mean, I've got a few of her films, and she's very attractive, really attractive. Something about those Italian women in the 70s films, I don't know, there's something about them I just like. Preferably when they're not getting their heads chopped off and stuff, though. Florinda Balkan, she plays this character called Carol, and she's kind of like this upper class, well-off, sort of, maybe a little bit snobby, and she has this neighbour who's like really into she has orgies, and they're always drinking and doing drugs. And you can tell that Florinda's character, this Carol's, kind of a little bit jealous, but she's kind of partly offended by it, but she's partly, you can tell that she just wants to kind of probably whip her kit off and go around and get involved. And what happens is somebody next door ends up being killed, and she witnesses it in a dream. And because of that, she ends up being like a suspect. And I'm not going to say anything else. It's a really, really stylish film. I'd barely even call it a horror film. It's more like just a really, really strong thriller. But because it's by Fulci, and because it's kind of around the same time we were doing this stuff, I'm going to call it a horror, although you technically maybe call it an Italian giallo film. It's definitely worth checking out. The music's fantastic in this as well. Like I said, if you want to get into Fulci, this is probably one of the first ones you should buy, along with Flesh Eaters and all the Beyond. And but really, really good film. The title comes from, there's a police inspector, and he takes a witness statement from these two hippies, and at the time that he's taking the statement, they're both high on acid. And I think he asks them what they saw or what they'd seen on that night, and they turn around and they're kind of laughing and they say, "Well, a lizard in a woman's skin." Really, really good film. Yeah, if you've seen some things by Fulch already, just go ahead and get this. It's worth it just for Florinda Balkan. She's really good in this, but I think I've told you that. I need to stop going on about her. 1972, and I'm going to go with a film that I took a risk on about a year or so ago. It were really cheap. I saw that it was from the 70s and I knew I'd probably like it. And it's a film called Scream Bloody Murder, and I think there's about 4, maybe 3 films already that are called this, but this is a 1972 one, and I expected it to be some sort of slasher, really. But it's a really, really weird film. It takes a lot of things from Psycho, although I'm not really spoiling anything. Don't worry, there's no twist in this film. It's not nearly as well made as Psycho, I guess. But for a really, really low budget film, it's pretty good. It's about this guy who's got a hook for a hand. I think he's a teenager. And when he were a kid, he accidentally turned his dad's tractor on. And not only did he kill his dad, but he ran over his hand, and so he had to get it replaced with a hook. And that's kind of what made me think it was going to be a slasher. I thought it was going to be, some guy running around with a hook, killing people that he didn't like. But the reason I say it's like Psycho is because it's more about, he's just got this obsession with his mum. And just an obsession with women anyway, and he kind of sees a little bit of his mum in this prostitute that he kind of gets obsessed with. It's a really, really crazy film, and I'm sure that the woman who played the prostitute, who he gets obsessed with later on in the film, is the same person who plays his mum, and it's kind of clever how they did that, because not only does the main character see a little bit of that in the prostitute, and that's kind of why he's attracted to her in a weird way, but it was just clever that they used, the same actress to play both characters. Yeah, you can probably pick this up for really cheap. This is one that, if you like the sound of it, go and give it a go, but it's not one that I'd recommend to everybody. It's a little bit slow, and it's not really a gory film either. It's more like, I can't really say without spoiling it, but yeah, really good. Give it a go. Maybe there might be a trailer out there somewhere. Just make sure it's a 1972 Scream Bloody Murder and not the other ones, because I don't even think they're horror films. I haven't got a clue because I've not seen them. Next up, for 1973, I'm going to go with The Candy Snatchers. This is a film that I think I saw somebody mention on Twitter a while ago, about a year or so ago. And yeah, they mentioned that it was supposed to be a little bit like The Last House on the Left. And the funny thing is that I think this came out the same year. And yeah, what it's about, these escaped criminals, I think there's like 4 of them. And they find out that this guy has got like millions of dollars and some jewels and diamonds and all this kind of stuff, and what they do is they kidnap his daughter, they bury her in this kind of underground coffin, and then they have a tube, so she can breathe. It's really weird. And so they hold her ransom, and so that they can get money from the millionaire who's her dad or stepdad. And the funny thing about it is, the weird thing about this film is the only person that is a witness to it happening, and the only person that knows what's going on, is this little kid that saw him kind of burying her in the ground. But the problem is the kid is both deaf and mute, and so it makes a really, really interesting film, and I really did enjoy this. It's not as good as Last House. I didn't expect it to be half as good as Last House. But it's really good. It's a really clever story, I guess. There is a little bit of sexy stuff and a little bit of violence in it, but you kind of expect that. So yes, for 1973, I'm going to go with The Candy Snatchers. It's a film that I enjoyed a lot. 1974, and I'm going to go with an absolute true as can be cult classic. This is absolutely brilliant film. It's 1974. It's a film called Bad Ronald. It's about this teenager. He accidentally kills this girl one day, and so that he doesn't get caught by the police, his mum comes up with this plan to hide him in the walls of the house. There's like a little crawl space type thing, but then the only way he can get around is by just, moving through the walls of the house. And so he has to live there practically for the rest of his life. But what happens is his mum dies and he can't do anything about it because obviously the police are looking for him. And another family move into the house. Unbeknownst to them, Ronald is still living there within the walls, and he gets obsessed with one of the daughters that moves in. And very, very good film. I came across a recommendation by Cool Duder, who's a really good really good horror YouTuber. He knows everything about everything. And I'd have never found this if it weren't for him. Directed by a guy called Buzz Kulick. And the really, really weird thing is that there's another film that is very, very similar to this called Crawl Space. And I just found out a few days ago that it's the same guy. He directed Crawl Space as well. I think Crawl Space is like 1971 or 2. It's a little bit earlier than this. And so this guy must have really liked working on, like, what's the word when you're kind of creeping around and spying on people? Voyeurism. He must have been like really into that. But yeah, Bad Ronald, look this one up. If you look any film up from any of these that I'm mentioning today, go look this up. I'm not sure whether it was even released. I think it was just a TV movie, because I'm sure that Crawl Space was just a TV movie as well. So yeah, for 1974, I'm going to go with Bad Ronald. It's a really, really good film. And yeah, the Ronald, it creates this whole fantasy world inside his head. I think he calls it Enchantia. It's really good. You're going to have to get this probably sent from America, but mine is region free, so if you can find a copy, look into it, watch a trailer, do whatever you have to do, just look into this film. It's Bad Ronald, it's from 1974. And 1975, I'm going to go with The Night Train Murders. I can't remember what the other title is for it right now, so I will look it up and I'll put it up on the screen now, because some of you guys in America or parts of Europe, there's a lot of films that have loads of different titles, especially when you're getting towards the end of the 70s and it's definitely the 80s. I mean, some of those zombie films have got about 4 different frigging titles. But I'm going to go with this. It's The Night Train Murders, and this is one kind of like the Candy Snatchers. I heard it had been compared to, no surprise, Last House on the Left. And this is essentially Last House on the Left, but on a train. It's really, really graphic, this one. Not so much what you see, it's just, I can't say, because I'd probably get into trouble for saying one of the things that happens in this film anyway. You got these fucking depraved, sick lunatics. They board a train and they hold these 2 girls kind of ransom to do like sexual and violent things with. But it's a really good film. I really enjoyed it, and of course at the end, a little bit like Last House and a little bit like, the Virgin Spring and stuff like that. You've got a little bit of a twist at the end, so you kind of, I won't say anything. It kind of justifies a few things in the film. You'll see what I mean if you ever watch it. But yeah, really good. It basically is just Last House on the Left, but on a train. I wish I could remember the other title, because it's like Night Trains something or other. Nah, I can't remember. If you like the Last House on the Left, or you like the Candy Snatchers, the Virgin Spring, I Spit on Your Grave even, it's one of those that you'd probably like. And so yeah, if you like any of those films that I've just mentioned, you might want to look into this. It's good. It's Night Train Murders. Next up, for 1976, I'm going to go with one of my favourite video nasties out of all the ones that were ever banned over here. It's not the best, but it's definitely one of the best. It's called Island of Death. It was written and directed by Nico Mastorakis. I believe that he did this after seeing the success of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Knowing that they did so much on such a little budget, he went out to try and make a film that would be a little bit nastier, and it is. This is it's way nastier than Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's not better than it though, but yeah, it's completely different. This is just really trying to shock the audience. And so it stars this young couple who go to, what's the Greek island now? Mykonos, I think. And they kind of go there on a short holiday, and you get a little bit of the impression that they're a little bit depraved. And I mean, at the start, he's talking to his mum on the phone while he's having sex with his girlfriend. And yeah, I think you kind of get the impression that they've gone there to have like a little break and get away from things. But their urges and stuff soon start taking over. They kill a lot of people. They have sex with a lot of people. They cheat on each other. And it's one of those that really, I can't recommend this enough. If you're into the video nasties and you somehow haven't seen this, it's a fantastic film. Really, it is one of my favourite video nasties without a doubt. It's so good. If you are going to buy it, look into the runtime. Maybe go on imdb.com. Make sure you're getting the full version. I'm not sure whether the one I own, this one that I'll be showing in the video that I'm going to record in a minute, I'm not sure whether that's fully uncut, but I have seen the uncut version, and I don't really want to spoil anything. What I will tell you is that the guy has sex with a goat, and if that doesn't make you want to see it, obviously you don't see it, but it's implied. It's strongly implied, in fact. But it's a really good film. It's one of those where I wish that they'd just reboot it, or it's not popular enough to really have a sequel made, which I think it would be a cool idea. But yeah, I'd love to see this, like a reboot, or just a complete remake of it, and just get like Tom Six or Fred Vogel to do it and just make it really fucking nasty. Nastier than it already is. So yeah, 1976, Island of Death. Next up, 1977, and it seems to be a lot of sex in this video. I wonder if it's just because they were looking at films in the 70s and they kind of liked doing it a lot in the 70s or something. But no, this is Emmanuel and the Last Cannibals. It's if nobody's familiar with the Emmanuel films, they used to be shown when I was a kid in the 90s. They used to put them on Channel 4 late at night, and they're really cheesy, like softcore pornography films, usually starring the character Emmanuel. I think there were a few people that played her over the years, but Emmanuel and the Last Cannibals is just a cross up between like softcore pornography and the then cannibal craze at the time. And I really liked all those old cannibal films. I don't think I've seen a bad one. Even the ones that are shit are still funny. But this is like just sort of unique. It does a good job of meshing them both together. There's a load of funny stuff that goes on in it that I won't spoil, and there's not really a lot of gore or stuff like that earlier on, but it kind of does pay off eventually. This had Laura Gemser playing Emmanuel, and Laura Gemser, by the way, well, first up, she's very attractive. Second up, she worked on either the makeup or the costume department on the now famous Troll 2 film, which I think's interesting. Yeah, if you like Emmanuel films, you're probably going to like this. If you like the cannibal films, you're going to like this. But if you don't really want to watch something that's kind of sexual or gory, then yeah, just give it a skip. But yeah, it's one that doesn't really get brought up a lot when people are mentioning the cannibal films, and to me, it's just as good as Cannibal Ferox. Maybe not Cannibal Holocaust, but you know, it's up there with Deep River Savages and all those. Yeah, give it a go if it sounds like something you'd like. Definitely give it a shot. And 1978, I'm going to go with the Toolbox Murders. I know this got remade a number of years ago. I've still not got around to actually seeing the remake. But this original's good. I picked this up really cheap once off some guy on a market stall. I think he was selling all these like previously banned horror films for like $2.50 each on DVD. But this is a really good one. I think this might have been one of the official video nasties. There's been a few that I've mentioned so far that were, but I'm sure this was. Yes, this guy, and as you can tell, he prefers to kill people using items from his toolbox. You got like a nail gun, you've got a driller, kind of in the vein of Driller Killer. And yeah, he ends up taking this young girl hostage and kind of keeps her. And he's really creepy, especially when he's singing to her. Anyone knows that song, which one is it? Motherless Child by Richie Havens? Yeah, he's got this young girl tied to a bed. He's got her all muzzled up and shit, and he ends up singing that to her, and it's just really creepy. It's sort of funny as well, just because he chooses to sing that song out of everything. But yeah, so the girl goes missing, and there's these two kids who think they know who it is, and they're kind of playing detective. But yeah, so this is one that I don't know if I'd recommend to everybody, but if you are on a quest to see all of the video nasties, then sooner or later you're going to have to cross this off your list. But yeah, it's a good one. I liked this one, and so I'm going to go with that one, yeah. So 1978, The Toolbox Murders. And last but not least, I think this would be a really good one to end the video on, because we've had a lot of serious stuff so far. But this is from 1979, and it's Microwave Massacre. And as you can tell, this is kind of a comedy horror. It really doesn't take itself seriously. It's by a guy played by Jackie Vernon. Plays a guy called Ronald, and he basically accidentally, on purpose, finds out that he has a taste for human meat and kind of gets addicted to human meat and becomes a cannibal. And it's really funny. There's loads of bits in the film as well, you know, where the fourth wall's broken. There's loads of bits where he just stops and looks at the camera and says some kind of sly joke. The relationship between him and his wife's pretty funny as well. No spoilers, but that does get really funny at one point. Yeah, the one thing that I remember when I watched the Blu-ray, I listened to some of the extras that were on it, and the entire film, the part that's supposed to be Donald's house, they didn't use an actual set. They used a real house, and the house had previously belonged to Mickey Dolenz from the Monkees. He'd just moved out of it about a month before they started filming, and he allowed them to use it to record the film. It's a really good one as well. It must have been made on a budget. I get that impression anyway. It's not long either. It's not even 1 hour and 20. I don't think. It's like, what, 60, about 70 minutes, if that. Yeah, it's funny to see Jackie Vernon as well, because he's really famous for doing voice acting. He's got a really standout, strong voice. It's really, yeah, I can see why he's kind of person that would be chosen to do that. It's a really rounded, kind of homely old man voice. Yeah, it's a really good film, this. If you like comedy horror, it's not one of the best, and it's a little bit pricey. I wouldn't call it expensive, but it's not one of those you're going to get for under £10. I'll just say that. And that brings us to the end. Thank you so much for watching. I am Walking the Cow, and today I've been talking through some of my favourite cult 70s horror films. I hope that some of you found some new films here today and that you'll go on and check them out, or at least it might have just reminded you that some films exist and you might just feel like, you know, picking a copy up again. But yeah, I'm going to leave it there. I really do hope you enjoyed this one and the 80s one that I did yesterday. And yeah, Walking the Cow, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.